Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's the one and only, your girl, the cartoon hotspot, and in today's video, we are going to analyze the episode Representation, which is season 5, episode 24. So we're rapidly approaching the end of the first narrative arc, and boy will I say, this episode was a lot. If you're interested in my thoughts, then stick around, give this video a thumbs up, and for new viewers, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click that bell button to receive post notifications. Without further ado, let's begin. So Representation picks up exactly where the previous episode Revolution ended. By now, Adrian has arrived in London and he plans on seeing Marinette. Plaid questions how he'll be able to explain to her how he's so able to make frequent trips from London to Paris, and Adrian states that he'll simply tell her he's Cat Noir. He transforms into Astro Cat and makes his way. We then see Marinette arrive at the end of the year school dance and she puts on a brave face, hoping to just avoid everyone so as to not show that she's visibly upset. Felix and Kagami are watching the entire thing and Felix questions, "Are you sure?" And then we're given a flashback on the episode Perfection, and it turns out that Kagami did overhear Marinette and Alia's conversation when Marinette states out loud that she's Ladybug. However, Kagami was in denial about it for a while until she finally stopped being in denial, I suppose. So yeah, Felix and Kagami know that Marinette is Ladybug. Okay. Anyways, Felix pretends to be Adrian so he can lure Marinette away from the school dance, and it basically becomes a wild goose chase whereby Marinette is so convinced that Adrian came back to look for her, and she basically chases Felix all over Paris until she finds herself back at school. When Gabriel discovers Adrian and Kagami have somehow escaped, he akumatizes himself into Night Tormentor, a supervillain who can make everyone's worst nightmare seem like reality. Night Tormentor searches everywhere for Marinette, so Cat Noir tails him to make sure he doesn't get to her first and harm her. During all of this, Felix creates a Sentimonster that turns into a projector, and he tells her the story of how Adrian and Felix came to be, with Kagami's help of course. We basically get a Graham Devinelli / aggressive family backstory, which I'll talk about later on. Whilst Cat Noir fights Night Tormentor and hashes out his feelings, basically everything he wishes he could say as Adrian, but for obvious reasons cannot, that's when he gets hit by a nightmare, in which we see Cat Blanc, but it's not Cat Blanc, it's anti-cat. In this nightmare that seems very much real, Night Tormentor tells Cat Noir that he caused the destruction of the world and killed Ladybug by recklessly using Cataclysm. Cat Noir is so distraught and horrified by this that he almost gives up his miraculous, until the resistance steps in and encourage him to keep fighting. Night Tormentor is defeated and Marinette agrees to help Felix and Kagami. And just as Cat Noir lands on Marinette's balcony to tell her of his secret identity, he gets struck with another nightmare and realizes that because Ladybug didn't perform a miraculous Ladybug to repair the damage, the nightmare is still there. It's so distressing that he fears of the consequences of him telling her his secret, so he decides against it. And at the end of the episode, Adrian and Kagami arrive back in London and are locked in a white room by Gabriel and Tomo. And if you guys didn't know, a white room is a form of torture. Gabriel and Tomo are quite literally the most disgusting parents I've ever seen in children's media. And that's pretty much the episode summarized. Okay, now let's talk about Felix's backstory. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, there was a king and queen and they were expecting an heir to the throne. However, the queen ended up giving birth to 2 girls, twin sisters, who we know as Emily and Amelie. They questioned who they entrust the kingdom to and decided it'd be Emily since she was born a few seconds earlier than Amelie. The issue was Emily hated life at the court. She's described as curious and wild, whereas Amelie was reserved and obedient. The king and queen hoped that eventually Emily would settle down and take her responsibilities seriously, so they allowed her to study abroad in France. It's then that Emily met a tailor who we know to be Gabriel Agreste. They fell in love and Emily abdicated from the throne and gave up her wealth, which obviously angered her parents. Nonetheless, they decided that Amelie would take over the throne, and Amelie ended up marrying a heartless lord of war, Colt Fathom. Time had passed and neither twin had given birth to a child, and I think it's been implied earlier on in the series that Emily and Amelie most definitely had fertility problems until Emily resorted to using the Peacock Miraculous to create Adrian. When Colt heard of this, he became enraged and jealous. He believed that his wife deserved to be pregnant, so Gabriel offered him a solution, the Peacock Miraculous. At first, Colt was hesitant on using sorcery, but eventually gave in and created Felix. The important part you need to note is that the emotion used to create Felix was jealousy, as opposed to love, which is the emotion that Emily used to create Adrian. and I'll talk about this in greater depth later on. Now, Amelie and Emily ended up giving birth at the same time, but shortly sometime after, Emily and Colt fell ill. Colt realized that he was paying the price for creating Felix, and soon his fear turned into hatred. He began abusing Felix emotionally, and there are implications that there was some sort of physical abuse as well. As we know, Felix and Adrian's amok is in the twin rings. Colt would often control Felix into doing things he didn't even understand why he was doing. So when Colt eventually died, Felix put 2 and 2 together and learned that his life was linked to the ring. So he made it his mission to free all the Senti-beings, in which led to him giving 14 Miraculouses to Gabriel in exchange for the Peacock Miraculous. Okay, and that was Felix and Adrian's backstory. The first thing I want to say in relation to this backstory is Felix's redemption arc, if we can even call it that. Now, it's been established that Felix is an anti-hero, which means whilst his intentions are for the greater good, his methods are sort of villainous. And we see this in the episode Strike Back. Yes, he wants to save the Sentis and free them, but he practically aided a terrorist without thinking of the consequences it might have on the people of Paris, as Ladybug rightly calls him out on. In Felix's mind, it was a rational exchange, but you can't claim to want to free your cousin by literally helping Gabriel acquire even more power. And this itself is fine. Like, I don't actually have a problem with this, believe it or not. The issue is the show is desperately trying to push this narrative that Felix has been redeemed. And whilst he is certainly not Gabriel level of evil, he hasn't exactly done good either. If you wish to redeem an anti-hero, you need to have them take some sort of accountability for their actions. So you mean to tell me Felix assaulted Ladybug in his debut episode, pretended to be Adrian on multiple occasions, one of which led to Ladybug losing 14 Miraculouses, then practically got rid of everyone by sending them to the Red Moon, and he still hasn't uttered some sort of apology? The first person he should definitely be apologizing to is Ladybug. He basically asked for her help without saying sorry to her. Like, what? How does that work? Speaking of Felix's debut episode, can we agree that the episode Felix did not do him justice at all? It actually set him up really badly. When you compare his debut episode to every other Felix-centered episode, you'd find that it seems like Felix is 2 different people. Felix in his introduction episode is portrayed as Adrian's evil twin who just enjoys creating a mess of everything and is very spiteful for no reason. Felix in Gabriel Agrest, Strike Back, Emotion and Pretension and Representation is completely different. He doesn't enjoy wreaking havoc. It's just something he has to do in order to get what he wants. If you're in his way and he sees you as a potential threat, although he may not take pleasure in hurting you, he will find a way to eliminate you. Think of it like this. When Felix tricked Ladybug in Strike Back, I don't think it was anything personal. When you make morally grey decisions, there are going to be a few casualties, and it just so happened to be Ladybug. Again, it's nothing personal. I don't think he hates Ladybug. I think he just didn't know who he could trust. It's safer to think everyone is an enemy than potentially trust someone and they end up betraying you, which is another reason why he should have apologized to her and then she agrees to help him. But yeah, Felix's redemption came out of nowhere because in the episode Emotion, he literally sent everyone to the Red Moon, and then what? He woke up the next day and decided he wanted to be good? And hot take, giving Felix a love interest does not make him any more redeemable. I will die on this hill that Kagami and Felix came out of nowhere, and whilst I do see the potential, they do make sense on paper, their relationship development, or rather lack of development thereof, was so poorly executed. Like, I am so sorry, but if you guys actually think about it, just for one moment, considering Felix sent Kagami's mother to the Red Moon, do you really think it makes sense for Kagami to just trust Felix so quickly? And keep it in mind, given the timeline of season 5, 2 episodes before the episode Protection, Kagami was literally crying because she still had feelings for Adrian. 3 episodes later, Pretension, she's suddenly in a relationship with Felix now? That's a week. Girlie did not waste time. That is a week between Protection and Emotion. Guys, I don't like Felix and Kagami. I'm so sorry. And don't even get me started on the fact that Kagami knew Ladybug is Marinette and she told Felix without asking Marinette first. They did Kagami so dirty, all for the sake of a boy. Yikes. I can't get behind this. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't like Felix and Kagami. I'm sorry. Anyways, we're still on the topic of Felix. But now I want to talk about how Felix was created and how that affects his everyday behavior. Like I mentioned earlier on, when using the Peacock Miraculous, a specific emotion is in play. When Master Fu used it, the emotion was hunger and anger. When Emily used it, the emotion was love. But when Colt used it, the emotion was jealousy. And it's that jealousy that influences the way Felix behaves towards Adrian. I'm of the opinion that Felix is sort of resentful towards Adrian. Now walk with me on this. So after Colt died, Felix discovered he's a senti-being, and let's assume he discovered this at the age of 12 or 13. As a young kid, you're supposed to be innocent and blissfully unaware of life in general. But when you learn of something very disturbing at a young age, it forever changes you and you lose a little bit of childhood innocence. Your perception of the world and life is forever altered. You don't get to be a child anymore. That's what happened to Felix. He learned that his life was tethered to the twin ring, and just as it gave him life, it could easily take his life away. In other words, it could kill him, and that's scary. He learned that his father was quite literally controlling him against his will, and when the person who brought you into this world and gave you life, whose job is to protect you, raise you, love you, no matter what, actually ends up abusing you, you become distrustful of everyone else. Your relationship at home influences your relationships with everyone else, and that's why Felix works alone, and he's extremely reserved. He doesn't have any friends, and he didn't trust anyone to help him with his mission.
Bet you don't have a lot of friends acting the way you do. Am I wrong?
Now, what does this have to do with Adrian, you might ask? Because Adrian has no clue what Felix knows. He's unaware of everything. If Adrian knew that Gabriel was controlling him and he's a senti-being, it'll quite literally destroy him like it destroyed Felix. So Felix feels sort of jealous that Adrian is so innocent. He gets to have that freedom, sort of. Adrian has the luxury of not finding out such disturbing things about himself at a young age like Felix did. Felix wishes he could have his innocence back. Adrian has everything Felix doesn't have. For example, friends. Adrian was created out of love, so naturally he attracts a lot of love shown through his relationship with his peers. And because Adrian is so innocent, this is probably why Felix chose not to tell Adrian he's a senti-being. Think about it. Felix has had so many opportunities to do so, but he deliberately chose to keep Adrian in the dark. Although I don't agree with this writing decision, it's still plausible. One of the reasons is because he wants to protect Adrian. He cares for his cousin so much that he doesn't want to ruin that innocence he has. Another reason is because if he told Adrian, there is a 99% chance that Adrian would not help Felix because of Felix's methods. Adrian is a goody two-shoes. Felix didn't want to take the risk of Adrian's morals getting in the way of his mission. Like I said, anyone can be a threat, including Adrian. However, the issue with Adrian not knowing at all, and this leads nicely onto my next point, is that he should find out at some point, but it doesn't look like he will. And here's a hot take. Ready? I don't think Kagami should be a senti-being. The storyline lost its value as soon as it was established that there are other senti-beings out there. And this is nothing against Kagami, believe me. But if everyone is special, then nobody is special. What I mean by that is the senti-being storyline was unique because it was solely Adrian and Felix. Their backstory is the entire premise of Miraculous. It's why the events of the show exist in the first place. Because Emily created Adrian, she fell ill. And because she fell ill, Gabriel became the villain. And because Gabriel became the villain, Adrian and Marinette got their Miraculous. There is a sequence of events. Kagami being added into the mix opens up a lot of plot holes that actually add nothing to the story at all. It's just purely shock value. When exactly was Kagami created? It definitely has to be a couple of months after Adrian and Felix were created. Okay, so why isn't Tomo in the same predicament as Emily and Colt? Because we know Gabriel and Tomo have definitely known each other for years. By the logic of the damaged Peacock Miraculous, Tomo technically should be dead. Was her punishment the loss of eyesight? Okay, but why? Just a bunch of unanswered questions. Kagami should have never been a Sentimonster, and this is a hill I would die on. Tomo being controlling and abusive is enough as it is for Kagami's character. She didn't need to be a senti-being. But because Kagami is a senti-being, she's kind of taken Adrian's place in the storyline. I'm no longer emotionally invested. I feel like this was a big fumble because Adrian finding out would be an opportunity for huge character development development, and I mean huge, but he's not gonna find out. Instead, we have Marinette discovering everything that concerns Adrian being left in the dark yet again. Somehow this is gonna be swept under the rug. So yeah, this is just my thoughts on the Senti-being storyline. Great setup, but it wasn't explored to its full potential, so ultimately I'm disappointed. Alright, the final thing I'm gonna talk about is anti-cat, and I'm only going to mention it for a few minutes because if I'm being honest with you guys, I don't actually care. One, because it's probably never going to be brought up again, and two, because we are yet to address Cat Blanc, as in Ladybug and Cat Noir are yet to have a conversation about Cat Blanc. So why should I care about anti-cat when it's just another opportunity for Adrian to experience trauma that's never going to be addressed again? These characters are just suffering for the sole purpose of suffering. But to be fair and objective, the only interesting element of anti-cat is that I find it smart how in the previous episode, Cat Noir mentally grew up and developed the ability to summon as many cataclysms as possible. However, it's that unlimited power that is the root of the nightmare. Having that much power in your grasp means you need to be careful, and if you are reckless, you could cause a lot of damage. And in his nightmare, he ended up killing the one person he'd never dream of hurting. Now tell me, how is that any different to Cat Blanc? Like, generally, what is the difference? Just a different name, different hair color, and different person experiencing the nightmare. My issue with Miraculous in general, but specifically season 5, is that I realize a bunch of stuff just get hurled at us, which leaves us little to no time to emotionally invest. So whilst season 5 has introduced some decent storylines, it's all over the place, and it's more so for shock value, because why introduce more storylines without wrapping up and addressing previous storylines? It makes us question why these storylines exist in the first place. And that brings us to the end of this video. Representation was an okay episode. Gotta be honest with you guys, I think I clocked out after Revelation, which is episode 20. I haven't enjoyed any episode past that because I really do feel that the direction the season took wasn't the right one and doesn't serve the story the way it should. Like I said before, a lot of storylines have been tossed in this season and it's just a mess. I'll talk about this in greater depth in my season 5 review video, but for now, I want to put it to you guys. What did you think of representation? Loved it? Hated it? Let me know down in the comment section. But as for today, that's it from me, and I'll see you again next time. What?